So how long have you been sat in this pub then, mate?
9 hours.
9 hours? Is it as long as that?
36. We've done 36 podcasts.
Oh, no.
I've had 17 Scotch eggs.
I think so for 17 scotches.
34 scotches, 17 Scotch eggs. I had a question for you.
Go on then.
Was avid podcast listeners will remember that you once announced you're an honorary secretary yourself.
I am the honorary secretary myself. Yeah.
Of a squash club.
The Avenue Tennis Lawn... no, I can't just say it. That's what I've had too many. The Avenue Lawn Tennis Squash and Fitness Club, which is like one tier below Wimbledon. We're like that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, exclusive.
And how's that going? What's
right.
your experience the honorary secretary?
I've just finished my first year as honorary secretary, and we just got through our AGM a big bylaws change, which of course I did a big bylaws change at Sequence up. I know my bylaws, and what I found out was that. I thought it was difficult getting a bylaws change to a bunch of patent attorneys who like to read their documents and interrogate them. Old people who play tennis and have got all the time in the world to study documents and then will argue about that you are introducing a deposit for a fob. Honestly.
Hang on a second. Introducing a deposit for a what?
So the club is remote self-access. There are small staff there.
Right.
But to get into bits of the club, you have a fob.
Oh, fob.
And people keep losing their fob.
So
one of my bylaw changes was to introduce a deposit for the fob.
Nice.
And so this a gentleman complained strongly about it in the strongest possible terms. Found out afterwards he's the habitual loser of fobs. So clearly wouldn't want a deposit to be applied to his fobs because he keeps losing them.
So it's the principal of the deposit or the amount of the deposit?
No, for him it was the principal. How dare you charge me for a fob? I hadn't realised that he had lost something like 12 in the last 4 years.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He needs a fob for his fob.
Exactly right. Or some kind of GPS thing attached to his fob. A fob finder fob.
Double fobbing.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the two IPs in a pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
So, there was a little bit of audience heckling.
Bands from outside.
A bit of bands from the audience. Podcast today,
yes,
all about women in inventorship, which is topical because World IP is on the World IP Day is on the horizon,
yep.
And the focus this year is women in IP and accelerating innovation and creativity. We've got probably one of the preeminent experts with us today on women in IP, Dr. Bola Olabisi. Bola,
hello.
Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm fine.
Are you excited to be here?
I am excited.
Yes. You've listened, haven't you, Tom? Yeah.
Yes, I've listened to one or two and I've been so impressed. I couldn't wait to get here.
Have you warmed up a bit? Because it was a bit nippy out there.
It was. But, yep, nice cup of tea in front of me and I'm fine.
Fabulous.
Ready to go.
Fabulous. But feel free to make as much noise pouring tea as you need and stuff like that. We don't stand on ceremony on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So I know that you are the founder and leader of the Global Women Inventor and Innovators Network. Don't know how you got there, don't know why you did that. Tell us your story.
Yes, it's interesting because as I was walking down the road and coming here, I said, this place is really familiar. And I haven't been down this end for quite some years now. But I actually started my working life not too far from here, High Holborn. Office used to be on that road.
It did, yeah.
And I was a clerical officer at the time, walking up and down those stairs at the State House. And to think it's no longer there, but bringing back so much memories from then on. But I knew I didn't want to carry on carrying files up and down all my life to all the examiners there. So, of course, I went off to university to kind of get more education, and that was in law. And community development came up. I started working within the community, trying to advance people, get their ideas out there. And then it started to come across that a lot of women were not getting their ideas to market. So many vulnerable people coming up with wonderful ideas. And it didn't really stick until I went to an Inventors fair, which was not too far from here, at the Barbican. They used to have this beautiful, big invention show. And you wouldn't think there was anything wrong with it because everybody was there, men, women, children, everybody. It seemed quite diverse. But as I started to ask the question, oh, wow, that's a good idea. Is it yours? And then it would be, no, that's not mine. You must be silly. It's for my husband or for my partner or my brother or my... And it started to get that way more and more. I started to get really frustrated that I must find women inventors at this fair. And so I walked up to the organizers and I said, could you please show me 1 or 2 women inventors at this fair? And they said, well, when you find them, let us know, because we struggle. We could say, you know, so it became an obsession to a certain degree. Yeah. And also passion. I was really passionate to just try and get those numbers up, try and see, you know, who the women inventors were, got onto Women's Hour, spoke about it, tried to, you know, get that spotlight on women inventors. And then I started to find and discover so many other things that I thought we needed to try and sort out. So, yeah, that's the beginning.
That was the beginning. And so the network came out of that. Yeah. So, can I start with the first question? Is that okay?
Cool. I love it when you follow your script. We always say this in the podcast.
You've started to answer it in any case. But as we're talking about World IP Day, where are all the women inventors?
They're everywhere. They are everywhere. And I think that it's just a case of some women are just not, you know, perhaps a lot of women really don't like to blow their own trumpet. Yeah. They're waiting for somebody else to say, you know, yeah, that's a good invention. Oh, so that's yours. And pat them on the back. Whereas, and there are some women, of course, even before you ask, they're out there saying, hey, come and look at what I've got. But it's been my experience that a lot of women are very humble, very conservative with their ideas. And so as a network, what we try to do is to put the spotlight on those very women, especially the ones that are unheard of.
Give us some examples of the people that you've highlighted.
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that question. And I came very unprepared for that. And the reason is that we've had so many that it's very difficult for me to start to pinpoint which ones, you know, I'm going to mention and all of that. But I would like to kind of go towards the ones that most people would probably say, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to go like the baby products.
Okay.
Yes, because a lot of women, you know, come up with a lot of baby products, things that are used in the homes, as to what some people would...
Gwilym's just had a baby, so this would be very, very...
Yeah, talk to me about baby products.
Oh, well, then. One of our very first women that we put the spotlight on, and you probably know her, is Mandy Haberman with the Anyway Up cup. And, you know, that was fascinating to a lot of people because of this cup that doesn't spill. And since then, we've had various other ones too. I know you probably wonder, you know, why are we talking about potty trainings in a place like this? But it is so important to some women and, you know, to even men as well in the family. And if they know what they go through to try and train their young people, and to think that we now have a wonderful inventor, Amanda, who has got these wonderful potty training equipments for the kids, and it's really out there in most of the shops. So I would like to mention a few more, but I'm just wondering which ones I should go for at the moment. So
no one's going to be offended if you leave them out.
So that's what I'm trying to think of. I don't want to leave anybody out. But yes, you can come back to that, and then I'd have figured out a few to mention.
Anyway Up cup story. Apparently, Mrs. Haberman sent the Anyway Up cup to all the major supermarkets with orange juice in and said, if this is spilled, don't call me.
Yeah.
And it hadn't. And so, she created an entire market actually.
Yes, absolutely. And she worked also on not just creating that invention, putting on the spotlight on the journeys that it can take for some people to get that product to market. And IP, of course, was one of the main areas that she focused on, providing a lot of people a lot of information in order to assist others as well. So she's on my top list.
so it's interesting you started with baby products.
Yes.
Gwilym and I did a podcast a few weeks back about femtech. I didn't know what femtech was when we did the podcast. So this is technology for women, targeted at and for women, things that they experience in their lives. So I learned interesting things about the fact that I have a pelvic floor. And it's okay to say vagina on a podcast.
You've literally done it again just because you know you can now.
Yeah, because I know I can now. But we learned some stats there, Bola. So can I just go through these, because I know you probably will know the stats, but let's kind of get them live. So one was that between the end of the 90s and just a few years ago, 2017, the proportion of female inventors doubled worldwide, but doubled from 6.8% to 12.7%. Yeah. So that's when you consider that the kind of sex balance, the gender balance, male-female, must be about 50-50, mustn't it? It's got to be of that order. There are only 12.7% of the inventor community that are female. And if you then look at that in terms of patent applications, the proportion of patent applications that had a female named amongst a group of inventors went up from 12% to 21%. So a fifth of patent applications now have a female named somewhere. But the proportion of applications with at least as many female inventors as males only rose from 3% to 8%. You've identified some great female inventors for us.
Well, I think that it depends on what's trending and how confident people feel about going the full steps to actually protecting their inventions. Depending on if they are lone inventors, the journey can be quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And if you're a woman inventor, you might even find it far much more challenging. When we first started, we didn't have these figures. And when we started highlighting the fact, and this was in 1998, that there were so few women inventors, we didn't have the evidence.
Yeah.
And so I welcome the fact that we can now start using these figures. Not that I can say that I'm totally, for these figures that have been branded around, but at least we've got figures, we've got something to be able to show that there's evidence that we need to do far much more to increase the percentage of women inventors. The other thing is that I remembered for a while that because of, we probably might talk about, the trying to encourage more women into science, engineering, technology, because these are traditionally areas where a lot of men, a lot of women are not necessarily there. But the figures are rising. They are rising. But at the same time, in my personal opinion, I feel that women tend to react to things that they can relate to more, especially the lone inventors. But I've been challenged before where they said, well, the problem here is that a lot of women come up with these things that are just not high-tech enough. And then I say, well, they might not be high-technology enough to you, but how about if they're high viability? If they're the products that we use every day, that they create jobs. Once they're out there, they create jobs, they provide a better quality of life for people. If they can tick those boxes, why are we so obsessed with the fact that it has to be so high-tech before we start to take notice of these products? And so I think that I'm a great advocate for more women in science, engineering, and technology, but I'm also an advocate for those simple ideas that make our lives better. And if the women are coming up with it, then I think we should be backing those sort of simple products.
The patent system's always had this it's always protected both sides of that, quite importantly. The only real issue is that in the kind of the simpler areas, you can only patent stuff that's not been done before, and people have thought harder and harder about it. But I've always felt that the simple inventions are sometimes the genuinely brilliant ones. As somebody personally been working on telecoms for years, and they're all inventions, don't get me wrong, but they are tiny incremental changes on some stuff that people don't make a difference to day-to-day life. But I wanted to come back to one point. You mentioned one issue there is you've got to let inventions come from different areas, not just from STEM technology, kind of higher degrees and everything else. But the other one was that issue that perhaps you were saying that women are less forthcoming when they actually have that invention. And how can we that applies to both areas? How can we change that?
Well, I think that some people might say, well, that was in the past. We have, very strong women who are, go-getters, and they, that idea that women don't have the confidence to come forward was something that was in how many years ago. But I think the reality is that it's likely that most women will go through different phases in life, and it's. There are times when you leave the working industry, you're off, you're looking after your kids, and then you come back and everything's changed. It's such a rapid, paced world that we're in. And that could knock anyone's confidence. And so your ability to catch up needs to be supported in an environment where they understand gender diversity and they understand inclusivity to, in terms of bringing people on board. And it's one of the things that we try to advocate a lot within the network. It's a supportive, friendly environment that allows women to be themselves and, and grow with their tenacity to bring their products out there.
What sort of things does the network do? What give the network a little bit of
a little bit of a plot, right? Yeah. Well, I think it's a network, as I mentioned, but it's women gathering together with male champions, because I would hate to think that we were sitting down there, all women talking and trying to support ourselves without men along, supporting us as well.
Allies.
So we do have men amongst us. But I think the main focus is to create a capacity building environment where we're able to engineer a system that advances the percentage of women inventors and innovators. A lot of people want to talk more about the innovators and entrepreneurs, and they forget or wish to leave the inventors out. I think there's a slight stigma to being called an inventor, because some people still believe inventors are crazy people that, think out of the box. You can't get them to,
live in the box,
to have a conversation. But I've found that that's not quite true. There's a huge amount to gain from inventors. And the fact that the ability to fail and get up again and know that you're within an atmosphere where they recognize that there are lessons to be learned from failure. So the network provides that opportunity, raising knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange, opportunity to celebrate as well. It's not easy. So if you've been able to get that product out there, it's on the market, we need to be celebrating, to be celebrated. And so that's one of the key areas that we look at.
And is there more, because there will be people listening to this who would want to be, there'll be men listening to this who want to be an ally, who want to do more. There'll be women listening to this who are inventors and might want to get involved in the network, or are in the sort of the IP protection side of it, so female patent attorneys, etc., who might want to do so. What can people usefully do to support you?
I think there's no support that is too little. Let's start from that point, because a lot of people think, we haven't got any money and we haven't got this and we really don't want to know what you don't have. We want to know what you do have. And that is, if you can create an opportunity that allows us to do what we do better, it could be the knowledge you have, raising awareness. This is one of the reasons that we're so happy that we're part of IPAN, the Intellectual Property Awareness Network, where they provide that amount of support for us. CIPA as well, Chartered Institute of Patent Agents. We've always had that opportunity to work with you in the past. We're hoping to work more again with you.
Absolutely, yeah.
As well as SIGMA, which we're learning far more about, but we can't say it loud enough. We do need the support to keep going. We need the premises to hold up our meetings so we can meet.
You're always welcome at SIPA.
Oh, well, good. I got you now. The networking is important, the knowledge, the trainings, the opportunity to be able to acknowledge and present awards to those who deserve it. There's a whole lot to think and choose from.
I had a question.
Go for it.
Actually, a couple of questions. One of them was, you talk about some of the kind of networks. You're like a network of networks. There's these other kind of organisations you work with. We've got World IP Day coming up, and I know WIPO is very big on this area. How are you finding the kind of the government level institutions with all this?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there's been so much going on now. I can't keep up sometimes. Yeah. 1 minute we're talking to one minister and we're ready to go, and the next minute, it's that, and we're trying to catch up, half the time. But moving on, we would hope that they're listening and that they would, play a much more bigger role than they're playing right now. They do. A lot of the policies and practices, it's a two-way process in terms of communication. We want to know what they're up to, but they also need to listen to us as well. We are a network that understands the challenges, that understands the achievements that a lot of our women have. And I think that we need to be sitting around the table, we need to be talking and trying to build practices and policies that actually work. So I'm keen to see if, that opportunity arise again, because we did have it in the past, but it seems to have kind of died a slow death at the moment.
More on that. What's happened?
Well, more on the fact that we're not sitting around the table enough is what I mean.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to sit around the table with the governors. You asked the question about the government.
Yes.
I'd like to see us having that dialogue that influences those decisions and those policies that they're making.
Be nice if they were the same people for long enough for you to have a conversation with them.
There is a continuity issue there, for sure.
Yeah.
It's good. And Gwilym and I have a kind of an ongoing, we probably shouldn't get political on the podcast, but the government's had forever an innovation strategy, but it very often seems to be impenetrable as how you get in there and you influence it and you make it work.
Yeah, well, I think that, I don't know whether it exists, but if it doesn't, mine would be, let's have that table, that network where key players are sitting around, key stakeholders are sitting around the table and are able to influence.
Mate, we can do something here.
Yeah.
So we have regular contact with the UK IPO at the most senior level. We'll make that plug. We'll take that as an action. We'll do that.
That's another one I'm going to come back to you on. I better note that down.
By the time this podcast goes out, we would have had that meeting. But we'll do it. We'll make a plug.
We want to have a say. Yeah. We want to have a say, and I think that it's by them giving us that opportunity for that two-way process communication that we could begin to get some much more positive answers to this.
We've got more to talk about in terms of the network and also IPAN, but I did want to weave into, if you'll both allow me, weave into this because we are thinking about women in IP, the SEPA story. Ooh. Women in SEPA. I've done it before on a podcast.
No one listens to a podcast.
But it was a long time ago. It was probably 2.5 years ago. So the stats will be a little bit out of date. But let me tell you how it's been for women in intellectual property protection. So women as patent attorneys. So I did some work for IP Inclusive about 3 years ago. It was a web piece that they were doing around women in IP. And I tried to find out who was the first female patent attorney in the UK. So we've got Ian, who's sat in the audience. Where are you? Out there somewhere, Ian, where are you?
Rosette. I'm just making there, yeah.
Three bloody Marys in.
So Ian, Bill, who looks after tech for us, Fran helped me on this. We started pouring through journals and the SEPA transactions and all of these historical archives. And so what we discovered, we found a minute in the SEPA transactions, which is where the minutes used to be published. You remember this in 1936.
Oh, of course.
So this is 12th of February 1936. This was the minute. The President said that the Institute that day was making history because, for the first time, its President had the pleasure of welcoming a lady fellow. A lady fellow. Mrs. Alderton, whose father, Mr. Andrews, was a well-known colleague. The President observed that medicine and law already had lady practitioners, but for some reason the Institute had, until the present year, been entirely masculine. He had much pleasure in introducing Mrs. Alderton to the meeting, and then, in brackets, applause. So that's fantastic. So the first female fellow, lady fellow, SEPA, that was in February 1936. But two women actually qualified at around about the same time. So that was, where have we got to? So that was Mrs. Alderton, Margaret Alderton, as was, and also Margaret Dixon. And Margaret Dixon actually qualified, I think, just a couple of months after Margaret Alderton, but worked as a full-time patent attorney earlier. So she was the first to get a full-time job. Yeah, so you've got first qualified, first fellow, but first full-time practitioner. They're both Margarets, fantastically. So they both got a claim to fame in that sort of who was the first person. So it's actually quite difficult to work it out. But we shouldn't dwell on the fact that one was before the other. That was a remarkable moment. But let me take the story forwards. The floodgates didn't open. I
remember this.
There wasn't then a great rush of women into the patent attorney world. It was 20 years before another female was admitted, Nancy Russell. In 1959, there will be people listening to this podcast who have done the maths and will say, 1936, 1959, that's not 20 years. There was a war, okay? And we didn't admit people during the war years. So 20 practicing years, if you like. And then that started the trickle gates to open. So it was about one woman a year for 30 odd years or so.
Hang on, but what's for the 80s?
To the 80s, till the kind of late 70s was on the show. And then things really started to change. Probably the EPC, probably the growth of the UK profession that was starting to happen then. And then it was 8 to 10 of 50 or so fellows we were getting a year, female. So kind of in the 20% sort of region. If you think about how many fellows are admitted these days, you see it when we meet in council. So we get 150, 200 new fellows a year, and about 40% of those are female now. So the world has changed hugely. Yeah. But I've tried to work out at the current rate of change. So male, female representation in society about 50-50, 49-51, wherever it is. It's going to take us about another 75 years at our current rate of change to ever be in the position where the patent attorney profession broadly represents the gender makeup of society, and that's where we are.
That's where we are. But I have to say that when we first started, it was very interesting that we had a lot of women in IP that were very supportive of what we did. Our very first independent judging panel was, we had Vicky Salmon, a wonderful patent attorney who supported us all the way, as well as Margaret Biffer, who was also playing a big role. And it was wonderful because it allowed us to stay focused on the necessary aspects of being able to move the network forward in terms of IP. Of course, we had the men who also supported us, but these two women played a significant role in the growth of the network.
And Vicky remains an incredibly important member of the council.
Absolutely, yeah.
Keeping us honest.
And that's somewhere else where we've seen an interesting change. When I joined the council, there were very few, when I joined SEPA, there were very few women on council. Whereas now we're at about that 40%.
Yeah.
Level.
Good.
So we're starting to see a change, which is good.
Yep. Good. I hope she listens to this when she at one stage.
My
special appreciation and greetings to both of them. Actually, if you meet them very soon,
we will make sure. We will make sure that they listen in.
That's good.
Tell us a little bit about the work with IPAN. So, what are you doing there?
Yes, IPAN. Now, we very keen to learn more about intellectual property. This is a space where a lot of the women struggle sometimes because it can get rather complex, and to be able to have the access to knowledge that would actually allow the women to be able to make informed decisions regarding which route to go helps a lot. Within the network IPAN itself, I've just kind of joined them as one of the directors on the board.
You are.
I'm observing quite a lot more than talking, but I can see that there's a clear path to raise awareness to, in terms of inclusivity, diversity, trying to ensure that people that perhaps try to do some more outreach work for people to come in, and I certainly want to ensure that part of the area that they look at is having more women, having a voice for women around the board itself. I know that as a result, we've been collaborating with the Women's Award with IPAN. So they have the IPAN Gold Award. It's in the second year now. We've had two major winners of this particular award, and it's just basically to try and raise awareness.
What does someone need to do to win that?
They simply just need to nominate someone who has got a new product, and then they also need to mention what they've done, what their journey is in terms of intellectual property. Have they applied for a trademark? Is it at that stage where it's a patent? It doesn't necessarily have to be a patent. It could be design registration. But it allows us to raise awareness in a very nice, supportive way.
We can be doing more here, mate, can't we? Because we can have this in the journal. We can be encouraging our members to nominate.
Yes, we certainly want to do that. We want to. They play what a lot of people, I guess, don't realize is that it's not about just handing out the awards. It's the role they play as role models.
Yeah.
They inspire others. They motivate others. There are people who come to me and say, I would love to do that, but I'm not sure I qualify. I'm not sure I can do this. And we say, just put it in. Just see. Let's see what happens. It's fun.
The underlying problem you mentioned earlier on is that people don't think that their inventions are...
The confidence aspects of it as well. It's just trying to boost confidence and show the world that it can be done.
You're a global network.
Yes.
So how much of your work is focused in the UK? How much of it is outside of the UK? And when it's outside of the UK, where are you? What are you doing?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because when we first started, we were talking about, give a few examples of the inventions. And I was like, okay, where do I start from? We're in the UK. I need to think about the UK.
No, you go anywhere you want.
But then I realized one of the reasons for why I was struggling is because we're everywhere now. We started in the UK. The initiative was here. We had a lot of support here. A lot of our events were happening for the first 10 years. We were based here. But we noticed that a lot of people were flying in, joining, putting their nominations.
I remember that from the event we held for you at SEPA.
Yes.
Where the overseas delegates.
Absolutely.
Yeah, huge number.
Huge number. They were just coming in, and it just seems rather unfair for us to be handing out awards and doing events that kind of in a way excluded them. And so when they started sending out their invitations to say, well, why don't you come to ours? To us, we're happy to accommodate you. And so before long, we found ourselves in Iceland, Finland, Estonia, Sweden, Italy, Singapore, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Kuwait, Bahrain. And
is there a country you've not?
I just keep mentioning them as they come out of my mind, And this is the thing: you might miss out some countries now. It's like, but we didn't mention our country.
Did you mention the US? How's it going there?
Well, the US, we do have applicants, nominations coming in from there, but we've not had anything in the US. But there was a time when we got contacted by the IFC World Bank to have this event in Ghana, which they supported and funded. So rather than it be taking place in the US, they wish to have it in an African country.
Wow,
we've it's been an interesting journey, and we're continuing with this with different networks regionally. So we have the European region, we have Asia Pacific. I didn't mention Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand. We have a network specifically for that particular area. And then, of course, for the Middle East, the main network is based in Kuwait, covering the Middle East region. But once a year, we all meet, as much as we would gather together in one particular country. And this year, it's in Iceland in September, where all the women inventors and innovators shall gather. And we hope to have a great event.
Celia, one of my colleagues, I think, is intending to go.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, good. Well, we've been having quite a number of people registering to attend. We certainly want to, to have more. So, yes.
I'll encourage it. So, do you have different challenges for different regions? Because that's quite a diverse geographical range.
It's strange that here we were thinking we were the forerunners. Here the UK education being number one, knowledge transfer exchanges. And so we were amazed when we started to venture out, how much was out there. But at the same time, it depended on the areas, on the space that we're looking at. Some countries are more driven by energy, sustainable products. There's a lot of support coming from their governments to push those kind of areas. And there are some that are just way, the disparity is so huge. But the wonderful thing is that being a network, that's why we're there, to learn from each other and to gain whatever we can from each other's countries to assist the women as they go along.
So I was thinking we probably ought to get a SEPA council member to go to Iceland. So
yes.
we're picked up. We absolutely should have some SEPA representation.
I think so, because we are having, if I may start to plug who's coming already.
Plug.
Well, we have certainly got IPAN coming. We've got WIPO coming.
Is that Lisa Jorgensen or?
I'm not going to say the name
no
yet.
No names, sorry.
But we had our discussions, and and of course, and I must mention this, that the reason for why we decided to go to Iceland is that their government, the First Lady, they're very interested in this aspect. They're going to be there. The Women Leadership Organization is going to be there. So we've attracted quite a number of people who really genuinely want to see the percentage of women inventors rise, not just within their own country, but right across the globe.
Terribly unfair question, Bola, but I'll ask it anyway because I'm the hard-nosed cop on the podcast.
I'm good cop.
It's good cop. If there was one thing you could change about anything in the whole IP landscape or wherever it is to make it easier for women to be inventors, what would you change?
Oh, goodness me. I'm trying to pick one.
Oh, no. I was trying to make it easy for you, but
let's pick one. I'm just trying to think of, in the whole process, I think that the application process is something that I would look at, because that in itself, and it's not just that. There are some places where you look at how to apply and then you find that if you're not sitting down in front of a professional that can really understand and really, untangle the complexities, it could be much more difficult. So that is one thing. Of course, I have loads, but I'll stop there.
Fair enough.
I have a similar-ish question. This is a classic non-executive. We have non-executive director at work, and it's a really good question to ask. Is for your network, what would success look like? What's your end game?
It's not an interview. But it's not coming for a job.
Well, I hope at the end of this I do get one massive job out of it. What would I? I think it would be if we could. There are lots of networks out there. And some are achieving more than others. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I would really like to see that this global network is able to look back and say, yes, we were able to make changes that mattered.
Yeah, change the world. Change the world.
Change. Well, not necessarily, maybe, why not? We're a global network.
Everyone should aspire to change the world.
Changes that make impact, that provides a much better quality of life for other people because of the products that have been able to get out. And those that, because I do see that there's so much that could be done, but still hanging out there.
I thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience and knowledge on the podcast. We're not yet finished. You don't get away that easily. Because we're going to have this little game we play at the end of the podcast where one of us used to always be me, but recently he's been trying to kind of muscle in on my ground. One of us comes up with a kind of question for us to try and answer kind of individually. Did you want to frame a question? Or do you want me to frame a question? I have a question.
Okay, no, please. Yeah, go.
So I would like to know, let's ask two questions. Because it's also, we're recording this in advance of World IP Day, which has got our women focus, but we're also recording it following International Women's Day. So we're sandwiched between those two kind of celebrations. So let me ask two questions related. So I'm after the names of two or more women, one of whom has made the biggest impact on you professionally in terms of intellectual property, and the other who's just had the biggest impact on you as a person. Can't be your mum. Okay, can't be your mum. So start thinking, Bola, because it comes to you next.
Is it me first?
It's you first.
Okay. So professionally, I'm worried about this because it's the same point you made earlier. It's all people are missing out. So to everyone I don't mention, there's so many people, but I would mention Heli Piliyama. Legal at the EPO, who has been working incredibly hard for the patent system. The EPO comes in for a bit of flack sometimes, but they're trying to do the right thing. And she's been a really impressive symbol of what you can do if you try really, really hard and if you really care about what you do. So I'd put her on the professional one. And my personal one, again, this is even more dangerous, is my daughter Polly, my 18-year-old, who continues to amaze me with the stuff that she gets up to. And if I've had any influence on how successful she is as a woman, I'm super, super proud because she's doing brilliantly. So there you go.
And the flaw in my question there was saying, not your mum. I should have said not a family member. Tough. Because you played a safe card. Yeah. Go on, Bola. How about you?
Okay, for my professional one, Andrea Bristol.
I forgot Andrea. I see.
Because
So that's
she
one of mine gone
really
now.
founded the IP inclusive network to me. And I think that is something. It takes a certain kind of woman to say, you know what, we need to do this. And my hat goes up to her. So certainly her. And now the second one, I know you said not family and everything, but how could I not mention my family? So I'm just going to drop that rule.
You do. I did not know.
And just go straight for my grandmother.
Oh.
My grandmother played a big role, huge role, and just made me feel I could, if you work hard enough, you can get there. And I'm still working hard. I'm still getting there.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Go on, Lee.
Yeah, it's me, isn't it? So, so professionally, I'm going to go for another super legend, Catriona Hammer. Not least because if it wasn't for the huge efforts of Catriona, I wouldn't be here. So there's a really interesting story. We don't have time to tell the entirety of it on the podcast about my recruitment process. Catriona was never involved in the kind of the huge panel interview that I had to do with about 27 people, largely most of council.
Yeah.
So was never involved in that. But because she was chair of the Finance and House Committee at that time, was given the job of then actually trying to recruit me. And I turned the job down 3 times because I didn't think you people were serious enough about the change that you needed to go through. And it was Catriona who convinced me if I came, I could do all the things that I wanted to achieve. So
best thing that's ever happened to see.
So Catriona gets a big shout for that.
Yeah.
And then on a personal level, but it's also kind of semi-professional.
Yeah.
On a personal level, but also semi-professional, there is the person who came in to be the chief exec of the Institute for Learning, Tony Fazali, who effectively took my job. So I had been there as its first interim chief executive, built it up from pretty much nothing, and then when they went to recruit a full-time permanent chief executive, they appointed someone over and above me because she was fantastically politically well connected. And I had huge at the time I felt quite aggrieved, but quite quickly realised I could learn so much from her in terms of her awareness about the political world and those kinds of things. That so she helped me be the person I am today in terms of the job that I did today. So, Bola, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been great. Obviously, every success with the network and the event in Iceland, and we will make sure there's a super person there.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you.